My name is Franklin, and at 22, I never expected to feel like a stranger in my own home. For years, my dad was my best friend and biggest supporter until he married Margaret 3 years ago. Last Tuesday at dinner, Dad dropped a bomb. "Starting next month, you'll pay rent if you want to stay here." Margaret smirked, adding, "Maybe it'll teach you some respect." After months of them calling me dead weight, I knew something had to change. Before I tell you how I turned this around, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to family who undervalued you. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood on the north side of Chicago shaped who I am today. Our house wasn't fancy, just a modest 2-story with faded blue siding and a small backyard where Dad taught me how to throw a football. It was home in every sense of the word, filled with laughter and love, especially when Mom was still alive. Mom's battle with cancer when I was 15 changed everything. For 2 years, we watched her fight with incredible strength, but in the end, the disease took her from us. Those were the darkest days of my life, but they also forged an unbreakable bond between Dad and me. We leaned on each other, two broken people, trying to figure out how to move forward without the woman who had been our anchor. Richard Miller, my dad, became my hero during those years. He worked overtime at his engineering firm to make sure I had everything I needed, never missing my high school football games despite his exhaustion. On weekends, we'd escape to Lake Michigan, with our fishing rods, sitting in comfortable silence, or talking about everything and nothing. Those quiet mornings on the water helped us heal. Our traditions became sacred: Sunday football games with homemade nachos, Christmas Eve drives to see neighborhood lights, and birthday breakfasts at Maggie's Diner downtown. Dad was the one who helped me with college applications, beaming with pride when I got accepted to State University. "Your mom would be so proud," he told me, his eyes glistening. Everything changed when Dad met Margaret at his company's holiday party. I was 19 and home for winter break when he told me about this amazing woman from accounting. I was happy for him, truly. After 4 years of him being alone, he deserved to find someone new. Their romance moved at warp speed. Within 6 months, he proposed. The wedding was small, just 30 guests at a local restaurant. I stood beside Dad as his best man, forcing a smile, even as worry gnawed at me. It wasn't that I didn't want him to be happy. Something about Margaret's tight smiles and calculating eyes made me uneasy, but I pushed those feelings aside, determined to support Dad's choice. In the beginning, I tried everything to welcome Margaret into our family. I asked about her interests, complimented her cooking, and even helped her redecorate the living room during summer break. But the signs were there from the start. The way she'd roll her eyes when I spoke about school, how she'd interrupt conversations between Dad and me, her complaints about my clutter whenever I visited from college. Despite the growing tension, I focused on my education. Business management wasn't my passion, but it offered stability, something Dad had always emphasized. I worked part-time at the campus bookstore, maintained a 3.8 GPA, and earned a partial scholarship that covered about 40% of my tuition. Dad helped with the rest, though Margaret's influence was evident in his increasingly frequent comments about teaching financial independence. When graduation came, the job market wasn't what I'd hoped. Entry-level positions in my field were scarce, and those available wanted 2 to 3 years of experience for jobs barely paying above minimum wage. After 3 months of fruitless searching, my bank account dwindling, I reluctantly asked Dad if I could move home temporarily. "Of course, son," he said over the phone, his voice warm. "This will always be your home." Margaret's voice in the background was muffled, but her disapproval was clear. Still, I packed my belongings and returned to Chicago, telling myself it would be for a couple months at most. The first few weeks back home were awkward but manageable. I kept to myself, spent hours each day, applying for jobs, and helped around the house, doing dishes, mowing the lawn, and even fixing the leaky bathroom faucet Dad had been putting off. I tried to be the perfect houseguest, hoping to minimize friction with Margaret. Gradually, though, I noticed Dad's attitude shifting. The man who once greeted me with bear hugs now offered brief nods. Our conversations grew shorter, his responses curt. When I asked about going fishing like old times, he claimed to be too busy. The distance between us grew, a canyon forming where once there had been solid ground. Margaret became bolder with her comments as the weeks passed. "Most adults your age have their own place," she'd say during dinner, not quite looking at me. Or Richard and I were thinking of converting your room into a home office once you're settled elsewhere. Each remark landed like a paper cut, small but stinging. I redoubled my efforts to contribute. I started cooking dinner 3 nights a week, deep cleaned the garage, and even helped Margaret's father move furniture when he downsized apartments. Nothing seemed to improve the increasingly frosty atmosphere. You're looking for jobs out of state. Dad questioned one evening, finding me at the kitchen table with my laptop. I'm expanding my search, I explained. The local market is pretty saturated right now. Was all he said, but his disappointed expression spoke volumes. Somehow considering opportunities elsewhere made me disloyal in his eyes. By the 2-month mark, the tension in the house was palpable. Margaret had taken to sighing loudly whenever I entered a room, and Dad's conversations with me had diminished to practical matters only. My childhood bedroom felt less like a sanctuary and more like borrowed space I was overstaying my welcome in. The family photos that once lined the hallway, including many with Mom, had been replaced with stylish prints and pictures of Dad and Margaret's weekend getaways. I was becoming a ghost in my own home, fading a little more each day, as Margaret's influence over Dad grew stronger. The man who had once been my best friend now looked at me like a problem to be solved, a remnant of his past life that didn't fit into his new one. The worst part wasn't the cold shoulders or cutting remarks, it was watching the father I loved disappear behind the husband Margaret wanted him to be. After a particularly discouraging day of job rejections, I decided to cook Dad's favorite meal, Mom's recipe for pot roast with roasted potatoes and that special gravy he always raved about. I spent the afternoon in the kitchen chopping vegetables and preparing the meat just as Mom had taught me, hoping a good meal might ease the tension that had been building for weeks. The aroma filled the house, and for a moment it felt like old times. I set the table with care, even using the cloth napkins, usually reserved for special occasions. When Dad walked in from work, his face softened at the familiar smell. "Smells like your mom's cooking," he said, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in days lighting up his tired face. Margaret arrived 30 minutes later, her expression souring as she surveyed the kitchen. "You've made quite a mess," she remarked, ignoring my greeting. "And those napkins are for guests, Franklin." Dad's smile faded as he glanced between us, ultimately saying nothing. He took his usual seat at the head of the table with Margaret to his right and me to his left, a physical manifestation of the divide that had formed in our family. I served the food, my heart sinking a little, when Margaret immediately reached for the salt without tasting her portion. "It's a bit bland," she declared after one small bite. Dad, who had already cleaned half his plate, paused mid-chew but remained silent. The awkward silence that followed was broken only by the scrape of forks against plates. I attempted conversation, mentioning a promising job lead I discovered that morning. "It's with a marketing firm downtown," I explained. "The position sounds perfect for my degree, and the starting salary is decent." "That's nice," Dad replied, non-committally, his eyes fixed on his plate. Margaret cleared her throat. "Speaking of money," she said, setting down her barely touched meal, "Richard and I have been talking, and we've made a decision." The abrupt change in topic sent a wave of unease through me. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but nodded for her to continue. "Starting next month," Dad said, his voice unnaturally formal, "you'll need to pay rent if you want to continue staying here." The pot roast turned to ash in my mouth. "Rent," I repeated, certain I'd misheard. $800 monthly, Margaret specified, a hint of satisfaction in her tone, plus a third of the utilities. The amount was deliberately high, nearly what I'd pay for my own apartment. $800, when I had no steady income yet, when I was actively applying for jobs every single day. "Maybe it'll teach you some respect and responsibility," she added, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Adults pay their way in this world." I set my fork down carefully, trying to process what was happening. "Dad, you know I'm looking for work. I've been applying everywhere, and I've been contributing around the house. Cooking, cleaning, repairs." "Household chores are expected, not extra credit," Margaret interrupted. "Richard and I work full-time. We don't need a freeloader who thinks washing dishes occasionally justifies free room and board." The word freeloader hit like a physical blow. I looked to Dad, waiting for him to defend me, to acknowledge all my efforts. Instead, he cleared his throat and said, "Margaret has a point, Franklin. You're a college graduate now. It's time to start taking responsibility. I am taking responsibility, I countered, feeling heat rise to my face. I've submitted over 70 applications in the past month. I've had interviews. I'm trying, Dad. Trying doesn't pay the mortgage, Margaret said sharply. We're not running a charity here. This was my home, long before it was yours. I said quietly, immediately regretting the words, as Dad's expression hardened. That's exactly the attitude we're talking about, he said. This entitled behavior has to stop. Entitled? I echoed in disbelief. How am I entitled for expecting my own father to understand my situation? Margaret's voice cut through the tension. See how he speaks to you, Richard? No respect. Always making excuses. This is why he needs a reality check. I've been nothing but respectful. I protested, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I've bent over backward trying to make this work. But nothing is ever good enough for her. Don't blame Margaret for your shortcomings. Dad snapped, his loyalty to his wife painfully clear. She's only saying what we've both been thinking. You need to grow up. The argument escalated with Margaret throwing in barbs about my failure to launch and Dad backing her at every turn. The final blow came when she called me dead weight that was holding them back from enjoying their lives together. Is that how you see me, Dad? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. As dead weight. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I think you're not trying hard enough. Your generation expects everything handed to them. Dinner ended with Margaret storming off, and Dad following her upstairs, leaving me alone with the cooling food and the bitter taste of betrayal. I mechanically cleared the table and washed the dishes, my mind racing with hurt and confusion. Later that night, I knocked on their bedroom door, hoping to speak with Dad alone. When he came out into the hallway, his expression was guarded. Dad, can we talk about this? $800 is more than half of what an entry-level position would pay me after taxes. It seems like you're trying to force me out rather than help me get on my feet. His face remained impassive. Margaret's right. It's time you learned how the real world works. No one's going to coddle you out there. Is this really you talking? I asked, searching his face for any sign of the father I knew. Or is this her? Don't bring Margaret into this, he warned. This is about your lack of ambition and responsibility. I'm disappointed in you, Franklin. Those words, I'm disappointed in you, cut deeper than anything else. After he went back into the bedroom, I returned to my room and sat on the edge of my bed staring at the wall covered with achievements he'd once been proud of. Honor roll certificates, sports trophies, my college diploma. I lay awake that night replaying the dinner conversation and every interaction leading up to it. The painful truth settled over me like a heavy blanket. My father had chosen his new wife over his son. The home that had once been my safe harbor now felt like hostile territory. As dawn broke, I made a decision. I wouldn't continue to live where I wasn't wanted. It was time to make alternative plans, ones that didn't include begging for scraps of affection from people who saw me as a burden. The morning after that disastrous dinner, I was up before sunrise, fueled by a new sense of urgency. While the house was still quiet, I revamped my resume, broadened my search parameters, and sent out 15 new applications before Dad and Margaret even came downstairs. When Margaret spotted me at the kitchen table with my laptop, she smirked. Finally taking things seriously, I see. Amazing what a little motivation can do. I bit my tongue, focusing on the application form in front of me, rather than her taunting. This wasn't about proving anything to her. It was about creating an escape route from a situation that had become unbearable. The following weeks brought a series of disappointing interviews. One company loved my qualifications, but chose an internal candidate. Another offered insultingly low pay for 60-hour work weeks. A third seemed promising until they mentioned the position had been filled just that morning. Each rejection stung, but I refused to let Margaret see my frustration. After a particularly deflating video interview, where the manager had clearly made up his mind before we even spoke, I called my former college roommate, Devin. We hadn't talked much since graduation, but he'd always been level-headed and practical. Honest opinion. You're fishing in an overstocked pond, Devin said after hearing my situation. Chicago's saturated with business grads right now. You should look at Dallas. The job market is booming there, especially in marketing and business development. My cousin Aaron works for a tech company that's always hiring. Dallas, I repeated, considering the possibility of moving that far. I don't know anyone there except your cousin. Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what you need, Devin replied. And Aaron's cool, he's got a spare room you could crash in, until you get settled. That night, after Dad and Margaret went to bed, I researched Dallas' extensively cost of living, job market transportation options. The prospects looked genuinely promising, with starting salaries higher than Chicago and a lower cost of living. I created profiles on local job boards and tailored my resume for the Texas market, careful to clear my browsing history afterward. This wasn't just about finding a job anymore, it was about finding freedom. The next day, needing caffeine and Wi-Fi that Margaret couldn't monitor, I headed to a coffee shop downtown. As I settled in with my laptop, a familiar voice called my name. Franklin Miller. I thought that was you. I looked up to see Mr. Peterson, my high school economics teacher and mentor. His salt and pepper hair had more salt than when I'd last seen him, but his energetic presence was unchanged. Mr. Peterson, great to see you, I said, genuinely happy for the friendly face. Please call me Tom. Now you're not my student anymore, he insisted, joining me at my table. How's life treating you post-graduation? Something about his kind eyes and sincere interest broke through my carefully maintained facade. Before I knew it, I was telling him everything: the job hunt struggles, the tension, with Margaret, Dad's ultimatum, and my secret Dallas plans. Instead of the sympathy I expected, Mr. Peterson's eyes lit up. Dallas, you say? My brother-in-law Jeff Harmon is a senior partner at Crescent Marketing there. They're always looking for fresh talent. Would you like me to put in a word? That chance encounter changed everything. Within 48 hours, I had a phone call with Jeff, followed by an invitation for a virtual interview the following Monday. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of genuine hope. Preparing for the interview while maintaining a low profile at home proved challenging. I needed to practice responses, research the company, and prepare a professional setting for the video call, all without arousing suspicion. I rehearsed answers in whispers while showering, and studied the company website on my phone during bus rides to nowhere just to get out of the house. The home environment continued deteriorating. Margaret accidentally deleted an important email confirmation from my laptop when she borrowed it to check a recipe. Dad criticized everything from my job search approach to how I loaded the dishwasher. The constant negativity was exhausting, making my determination to leave stronger each day. 3 days before my interview disaster struck, I returned from a quick grocery run to find Margaret in my room holding printouts about Dallas apartment costs I'd forgotten to hide. Planning a vacation, while you can't even pay rent? She asked, waving the papers. Or is this your secret escape plan? You had no right to go through my things, I said, snatching the papers from her hand. This is our house, she countered, and you're being sneaky under our roof. The confrontation escalated when Dad came home with Margaret painting me as ungrateful and deceptive. He's been planning to leave all along, Richard, making us worry about his job search when he never intended to stay. Dad looked at me with a mixture of anger and hurt. Is this true? You've been lying to us. I've been exploring all my options, I said carefully, which seems prudent given recent developments. Don't get clever with me, Dad snapped. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me lately, Dad? The words burst out before I could stop them. Except, make me feel unwelcome in my own home. His face reddened. That's it. You have until the 15th to start paying rent, not the 1st of next month. And it's $1,000 now, not $800. As they left my room, Margaret's satisfied smile told me everything I needed to know. She'd been looking for an excuse to accelerate my departure, and I'd handed it to her. That night I emailed Mr. Peterson asking if he knew of any temporary housing options in Dallas. My timetable had just been moved up considerably. Monday morning arrived with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Margaret had accidentally reset our home router that morning, forcing me to abandon my plan of interviewing from my bedroom. With only an hour before my scheduled interview, I grabbed my laptop and raced to the public library downtown. I need a private study room, I explained breathlessly to the librarian. It's for a job interview. The elderly woman smiled kindly. Room 3 is available for the next 2 hours. Good luck, young man. The small room was perfect, quiet, with neutral walls and decent lighting. I set up my laptop, straightened my tie, and took several deep breaths to calm my racing heart. This interview wasn't just about a job. It was about reclaiming my independence and self-respect. At precisely 10 o'clock, the video call connected, revealing a woman with warm brown eyes and a no-nonsense expression, Franklin Miller. I'm Natalie Winters, marketing director at Crescent. Jeff Harmon spoke highly of you. The interview began with standard questions about my education and experience, but soon shifted to more thoughtful territory. Natalie seemed genuinely interested in my analytical approach and creative problem-solving skills. When she presented a real marketing challenge the company was facing and asked for my thoughts, our conversation became energized and collaborative. Your perspective is refreshing, she commented, after I outlined a social media strategy targeting millennials. Most candidates recite textbook answers, but you're considering actual consumer psychology. The planned 30-minute interview stretched to nearly an hour. As we wrapped up, Natalie smiled, the first real smile of our conversation. Franklin, I'm going to be direct. We've been interviewing for this position for 3 weeks, and you're the first candidate who seems to actually understand what we do. The position is entry-level marketing coordinator with a focus on digital campaigns. Starting salary is $42,000 with benefits after 90 days. When could you start? The unexpected offer left me momentarily speechless. You're offering me the position. Now, I trust Jeff's judgment, and you've confirmed his assessment. We need people who can think on their feet. Is that a yes? Could I have 48 hours to consider? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, despite the excitement bubbling inside me. This would involve relocating to Dallas, so I need to sort out some logistics. Of course. I'll have HR send over the formal offer letter today. We'd like an answer by Wednesday. After ending the call, I sat in the library room, my mind racing with possibilities and practicalities. $42,000 was more than I'd expected for an entry-level position, enough to afford a decent apartment and still save something each month. The job itself sounded challenging, but exciting, exactly the kind of opportunity I'd been hoping for. I texted Devin immediately. They offered me the job on the spot. Is your cousin's spare room still available? His reply came minutes later. Congrats. Aaron says you can stay the first month rent-free while you get settled. Just contribute to utilities. When do you start? The pieces were falling into place, but the decision still felt momentous. Moving to Dallas meant leaving behind everything familiar, my hometown, my few remaining friends, and most significantly, my increasingly strained relationship with Dad. Would distance make things better or worse? Was I running away from problems I should face? I spent the afternoon walking along Lake Michigan, weighing the pros and cons. The lake had always been my thinking place, where Dad and I had our best talks during those difficult years after Mom died. Now, I was alone with the gentle waves and my thoughts. By sunset, clarity emerged. Staying in Chicago meant continued conflict, financial strain, and watching my relationship with Dad deteriorate further under Margaret's influence. Moving to Dallas offered professional growth, financial independence, and maybe eventually a healthier relationship with Dad, once Margaret's daily poisoning wasn't a factor. That evening, I reached out to Aaron, directly thanking him for the housing offer and asking practical questions about the area. His enthusiastic responses reinforced my growing conviction that this move was the right choice. The marketing scene here is exploding, he wrote, and my apartment is 15 minutes from Crescent's office. You'd be welcome as long as you need, but there are affordable places nearby when you're ready for your own space. The following morning, the formal offer letter arrived in my email, complete with salary details, benefits information, and a proposed start date 2 weeks away. The reality of this opportunity hit me full force. This wasn't just escape, it was advancement. I spent the day making initial preparations. I organized my bank accounts, researched transportation options to Dallas, and made an inventory of what to take and what to leave behind. Each practical step strengthened my resolve and calmed my anxiety about the massive change ahead. That evening, I noticed Dad alone in the backyard, Margaret having gone to her weekly book club. It seemed like the perfect opportunity for one last honest conversation. Got a minute, I asked, stepping onto the patio where he sat, staring at Mom's old flower garden, now replanted with Margaret's preferred succulents. He nodded, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, until I finally gathered my courage. "Dad, I got a job offer today. It's in Dallas, a marketing position, with good pay and growth potential." His expression remained neutral. "Dallas, that's quite far." "It's a great opportunity," I said carefully. "The kind that doesn't come along often for new graduates." "So you're actually leaving?" It wasn't a question. "I think it's for the best, don't you? Things haven't exactly been comfortable here." He sighed heavily. "Margaret means well. She just thinks you need motivation." "Dad, she called me dead weight. She's been trying to push me out since day one." "That's not fair, Franklin. She's adjusting to having you here, just like you're adjusting to having her in our lives." "It's been 3 years," I pointed out, "and this was my home first." His jaw tightened. "It's still your home. Paying rent doesn't change that." "A home is where you feel welcome," I said quietly. "I haven't felt that here in a long time." Something flickered in his eyes, regret perhaps, or recognition, but it quickly disappeared. "If Dallas is what you want, I won't stand in your way." It wasn't the reconciliation I'd hoped for, but it was something. As we sat in the growing darkness, I realized this might be the last peaceful moment we'd share for a long time. The distance between us wasn't just about Margaret anymore. It was about Dad's unwillingness to see how his choices had affected me. When Margaret's car pulled into the driveway, Dad stood quickly as if caught doing something wrong. "Think carefully before you make any big decisions," he said, heading inside, without waiting for my response. That night, I sent my formal acceptance to Crescent Marketing. Whatever challenges lay ahead in Dallas, they couldn't be more difficult than remaining where I wasn't valued. I was choosing myself perhaps for the first time in my life. With my decision made, and the job formally accepted, I began packing in earnest. I started with items Margaret wouldn't notice. Winter clothes stored in boxes, books from the bottom shelves, mementos I kept in my closet. Each evening after they went to bed, I'd carefully pack another box and store it in my car parked down the street to avoid suspicion. I'd planned to announce my departure 3 days before leaving, hoping to minimize drama while still allowing for a proper goodbye. But as with many carefully laid plans, things didn't unfold as expected. 5 days before my planned departure, Margaret came into my room without knocking while I was at a doctor's appointment for pre-employment paperwork. When I returned, she was waiting in the living room, her expression thunderous. "Care to explain why half your belongings are in boxes?" she demanded the moment I walked through the door. I set down my keys, mentally adjusting to this forced timeline. "I was going to tell you both together. I've accepted a position in Dallas." "So you were just going to sneak away, after all we've done for you?" "I wasn't sneaking," I replied calmly. "I was organizing before making an announcement." She scoffed. "Richard will be devastated. First your mother leaves him, now you." The cruel comparison to Mom's death sent a wave of anger through me, but I forced myself to remain composed. "I'm not dying, Margaret. I'm starting my career. In Dallas, please. You're running away because you can't handle adult responsibilities." Before I could respond, Dad's car pulled into the driveway. Margaret's eyes gleamed with anticipation as she called out, "Richard, you need to come in here right now." Dad entered, looking tired from his workday, his confusion turning to concern as he registered the tension in the room. "What's going on?" "Your son has been secretly packing," Margaret announced. "He's abandoning you, abandoning us, and sneaking off to Dallas." Dad's eyes found mine. "Dallas. Is this about that job you mentioned?" "Yes," I confirmed. "I accepted the offer. I start next Monday." "And you were planning to tell us when?" he demanded, his voice rising. "This weekend. I wanted to have all the details finalized first." Margaret interrupted. "He's been lying for weeks, Richard, planning his escape while pretending to look for jobs here." It wasn't like that, I insisted. The Dallas opportunity came up unexpectedly. "It's a legitimate marketing position with Crescent Marketing." "Probably some minimum wage job he's exaggerating," Margaret muttered. Something in me snapped. After months of belittlement and accusations, I was done holding back. It's $42,000 a year, with health benefits and advancement opportunities. I'll be working on digital marketing campaigns for major clients. I got the job because my skills impressed them, not because I was desperate to escape, though that was certainly a factor too. Dad's expression changed surprise, mixed with something that looked almost like pride, before Margaret placed a hand on his arm. Richard, don't you see what he's doing? He's trying to hurt you by leaving. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, I countered. I'm accepting a great opportunity that happens to be in another city. After everything we've sacrificed, she continued as if I hadn't spoken. After sheltering him, feeding him. For 3 months, I exclaimed. After I lived independently for 4 years during college. And let's be honest, Margaret, you've wanted me gone since day one. You've made that abundantly clear. How dare you? Tell me I'm wrong, I challenged. Tell me you haven't been pushing Dad to charge me exorbitant rent. Tell me you haven't called me deadweight and a freeloader behind my back. Dad looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. Franklin, that's enough. No, it's not, I insisted. For months, I've watched you take her side in every disagreement, big or small. I've been treated like an unwelcome guest in the home. I grew up in the home where Mom and I— Don't bring your mother into this, Dad shouted, his face flushing. Why not? She'd be heartbroken to see how quickly you forgot about us, how completely you've erased her from this house. Margaret's expression darkened. This is exactly why I wanted your room for my home office. You're living in the past, Franklin. Richard has moved on. It's time you did too. Her words hung in the air, the truth finally exposed. Dad's face paled as he looked at his wife. Your office. You told me you thought Franklin needed the push to become independent. He does, she insisted. But that room is wasted as a shrine to his childhood. We need the space, Richard. We've discussed this. You discussed it? I corrected. And manipulated Dad until he agreed. Dad raised his hands. Enough, both of you. Franklin, if you've accepted this job, then we should discuss your plans rationally. There's nothing to discuss, Margaret interjected. He's made his choice. I studied my father's face, searching for any sign of the man who had once been my best friend and fiercest advocate. She's right about one thing, Dad. I have made my choice. I'm choosing to go somewhere I'm valued. The argument continued in circles, with Margaret growing increasingly hostile and Dad caught uncomfortably in the middle. I refused to engage in her personal attacks, instead focusing on the practical details of my departure and new position. My composure seemed to infuriate her further, while Dad became more subdued as the reality of my imminent departure sank in. That night and the following day, I finished packing, while Margaret continued making cutting remarks whenever our paths crossed. Dad alternated between awkward attempts at conversation and long periods of silence. The tension was exhausting but also clarifying. Every interaction reinforced that leaving was the right decision. On Friday evening, as I loaded the last essential belongings into my car, Dad came out to the driveway alone. You don't have to leave right away, he said, his voice gruff. We could figure something out. I closed the trunk, turning to face him. I start work on Monday, Dad. And honestly, I think some distance might be good for all of us right now. He nodded, looking older than his 52 years. Your mother would be proud of you taking this step. The mention of Mom, the first time he'd brought her up voluntarily in over a year, caught me off guard. I hope so. She would, he insisted. She always said you had more courage than either of us. We stood awkwardly for a moment before he extended his hand. I took it, then pulled him into a hug instead. He stiffened initially, but then embraced me briefly before stepping back. Drive carefully, he said. And call when you get there, so I know you arrive safely. I will. I promised, getting into my car. As I backed out of the driveway, I caught a final glimpse of my childhood home. Dad, standing alone in the fading light. Margaret watching stone-faced from the living room window. Mixed emotions churned inside me, grief for what had been lost, anger at how things had unfolded, but also a surprising sense of hope and determination about the future I was driving toward. The 14-hour drive to Dallas gave me plenty of time to process everything that had happened and prepare mentally for what lay ahead. I alternated between practical planning, emotional reflection, and simply enjoying the freedom of the open road. With each mile marker, the weight on my shoulders seemed to lighten incrementally. I arrived at Aaron's apartment complex shortly after noon on Saturday, tired but excited. The sprawling development with its southwestern architecture and palm-lined entrance looked nothing like Chicago's brick and concrete, a visible reminder of how far I'd come. Aaron greeted me in the parking lot with an easy smile and firm handshake. The famous Franklin Devins told me so much about you, I feel like we've already met. Despite never having met before, Aaron's friendly demeanor immediately put me at ease. He helped unload my car, chatting about the neighborhood, and offering practical advice about Dallas living. The spare room isn't huge, he warned, as he opened his apartment door, but it's yours as long as you need it. The room was indeed small, but clean and functional, with a twin-bed desk and enough closet space for my limited wardrobe. Through the window, I could see the community pool, and beyond it, the Dallas skyline, a view that symbolized possibility in a way Chicago's familiar outline no longer did. This is perfect, I told him sincerely. I can't thank you enough. Hey, any friend of Devon's, he shrugged. Besides, I've been the new guy in town before. It helps to have a friendly face. The weekend passed in a blur of unpacking area orientation and preparation for Monday. Aaron introduced me to his favorite local restaurants, showed me the most efficient route to Crescent Marketing's offices, and even helped me iron my shirts for the first week. Sunday evening, after a day of exploration and preparation, I remembered my promise to Dad. With some trepidation, I called his cell phone. Franklin, he answered on the second ring. Are you there safely? Got in yesterday, I confirmed. The apartment is great, and my roommate's been really helpful. Good, he replied, his voice stiff. And the job starts tomorrow. Yes. Orientation in the morning, then meeting my team in the afternoon. An awkward silence followed, filled with all the things neither of us knew how to say. In the background, I could hear Margaret asking who was calling. Well, good luck tomorrow, Dad finally said. Let me know how it goes. I will. I promised. Though we both knew the conversation was merely a formality, an obligation fulfilled. Monday morning arrived with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. I dressed carefully in my best suit, grateful that Aaron's apartment was just 15 minutes from Crescent's downtown office. The company occupied 3 floors of a gleaming high-rise. Its modern lobby, featuring the crescent moon logo I'd researched extensively. Natalie Winters greeted me with the same direct manner she'd shown in our interview. Welcome aboard, Franklin. Ready to dive in? The orientation was comprehensive but efficient. Company history, policies, benefits, enrollment, and technology setup all completed before lunch. Afterward, Natalie introduced me to the digital marketing team, 5 people who would become my closest colleagues. Everyone, this is Franklin Miller, our new digital marketing coordinator. He impressed us with his fresh perspective on the SunTech campaign, so I expect great things. Jason Chen, the team's analytics specialist, immediately took me under his wing. First day's always overwhelming, he said, as he showed me to my workstation. But we're pretty laid back here, despite Natalie's intensity. Just ask questions, and you'll be fine. That first day set the tone for my new life. The work was challenging but engaging, requiring both creativity and analytical thinking. My colleagues were supportive without being overbearing, and Natalie's leadership style, direct but fair, helped me quickly understand expectations. The initial weeks passed in a productive blur. During the day, I immersed myself in learning Crescent systems and contributing to ongoing campaigns. Evenings were spent exploring Dallas with Aaron, or occasionally joining team members for happy hour. Weekends became opportunities for apartment hunting and broader city exploration. By the end of my first month, I'd found an affordable 1-bedroom apartment just 10 minutes from the office. The place was small, but modern, with large windows and a balcony overlooking a tree-lined street. The day I signed the lease felt monumental, my first truly independent home earned through my own efforts. Throughout this time, communication with Dad remained sporadic and surface level. His text messages evolved from brief check-ins. Hope work is going well, to occasional attempts at longer conversations. Saw the Cowboys lost again. Are people there upset? I maintained polite but distant responses, still nursing the hurt of those final weeks in Chicago. Margaret, meanwhile, had apparently begun controlling the narrative with extended family. My cousin Emma called one evening, concerned after hearing I'd abandoned Dad without warning. It took 20 minutes to give her the actual story, after which she was firmly in my corner. Aunt Linda always said Margaret was bad news, Emma confided. But Uncle Richard seemed happy, so we all kept quiet. Rather than engaging in family drama, I channeled my energy into professional growth. My first major project, a social media campaign for a local restaurant chain, exceeded targets by 20%, earning praise from both the client and Natalie. You have good instincts, she told me during my 3-month review, and you're not afraid to offer new ideas, which is refreshing for someone at your level. The positive feedback boosted my confidence, helping me shed the self-doubt that Margaret's constant criticism had instilled. I began volunteering for additional projects, expanding my skills, and building relationships across departments. It was at an interdepartmental meeting that I first met Alicia Morales, a graphic designer from our partner agency. She had an infectious laugh and a talent for translating marketing concepts into compelling visuals. What began as professional collaboration gradually evolved into friendship as we discovered shared interests in independent films and hole-in-the-wall restaurants. You're not like most marketing guys, she remarked one evening as we left a foreign film festival. You actually listen when people talk. Maybe I just like hearing what you have to say, I replied, surprising myself with the subtle flirtation. Her smile suggested she didn't mind the direction our friendship seemed to be taking. As I approached the 6-month mark in Dallas, I found myself reflecting on how dramatically my life had changed. My apartment was now fully furnished with a style that was uniquely mine. I'd been promoted to junior marketing manager after demonstrating leadership on several successful campaigns. I had a growing circle of friends and a potential romantic relationship developing with Alicia. Most importantly, I'd reclaimed my sense of self-worth and purpose. Then came the call that disrupted my carefully constructed new normal. Franklin Dad's voice sounded strained over the phone. I'll be in Dallas next week for a conference. I was hoping we could meet for dinner. The request caught me off guard. In 6 months, our communication had never progressed beyond text messages and occasional brief calls. Is Margaret coming with you? I asked cautiously. No, he replied, after a pause. Just me. Something in his tone, a vulnerability I hadn't heard in years, made the decision for me. Tuesday works. There's a good steakhouse near my office. As I ended the call, I wondered what had prompted this sudden desire for face-to-face conversation, and what it might mean for our fractured relationship. The steakhouse I'd chosen was upscale, but not pretentious, with private booths that would allow for conversation without interruption. I arrived early, ordering a whiskey to calm the unexpected nervousness that had been building all day. Dad walked in precisely at 7, dressed in a business suit that looked slightly too large for him. Had he lost weight? Or was my memory playing tricks? He spotted me and approached with an uncertain smile that reminded me of earlier, happier times. Franklin, he said, extending his hand. You look well. Thanks, I replied, standing to shake his hand before gesturing to the seat across from me. How's the conference? Small talk carried us through ordering drinks and appetizers, neutral topics like the Dallas weather, my apartment location, his hotel accommodations. But as our entrees arrived, the superficial conversation dried up, leaving an awkward silence. I didn't ask to meet just to discuss the weather, Dad finally said, setting down his fork. I wanted to see you, to talk properly. Away from Margaret's influence, he seemed different, more like the father I remembered. His shoulders weren't as tense, his expressions more genuine. I'm listening, I said, neither encouraging nor discouraging whatever he planned to say. He took a deep breath. I handled things poorly before you left. I know that now. The simple acknowledgement caught me off guard. Yes, you did. Margaret and I. He hesitated. Things have been difficult lately. Your departure forced me to see some truths I'd been avoiding. What kind of truths? I asked carefully. That I allowed her to come between us. That I didn't stand up for you when I should have. He looked down at his plate. That I've been a terrible father these past few years. The raw admission hung between us. Part of me wanted to immediately offer absolution to ease his obvious guilt, but another part, the part still nursing deep wounds, needed more. Why, I asked simply. Why did you let it happen? He considered the question thoughtfully. After your mother died, I was lost. When Margaret came along, she was so confident, so certain about everything. It was easier to follow her lead than to make decisions. And then it became a habit, a pattern I couldn't break. He met my eyes directly. That's an explanation, not an excuse. I should have been stronger. Yes, you should have. I agreed, but without the anger that would have colored those words 6 months earlier. I needed my dad, not Margaret's husband. I know. He hesitated, then added quietly, she's talking about divorce. The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? He asked with a wry smile. I'm sorry you're hurting, I clarified, but I can't say I'm sorry about the possibility of her not being in your life. He nodded, accepting the honest response. Fair enough. As dinner progressed, our conversation became more natural. I shared stories about my work, my promotion, and my growing circle of friends. He told me about changes at his company, and how he'd recently reconnected with his brother, my Uncle Steve, after years of minimal contact. I've been thinking a lot about family lately, he admitted, about how easily connections can be broken and how hard they are to repair. Some things can't be undone, I said carefully. But that doesn't mean new foundations can't be built. His smile was tinged with hope. I'd like that, Franklin. To build something new. By the time we finished dinner, we'd established a tentative framework for moving forward: regular phone calls, honest communication, and no pressure for immediate forgiveness. It wasn't the complete reconciliation part of me had longed for, but it was a beginning built on truth rather than obligation. As we parted outside the restaurant, Dad surprised me with a brief but sincere hug. I'm proud of what you've accomplished here, he said, on your own terms. Those words, so long withheld, so desperately needed, washed over me like a healing balm. The months that followed brought significant changes in both our lives. Dad finalized his divorce from Margaret, selling the house we'd lived in and moving to a smaller place closer to his work. Our weekly phone calls became a consistent touchpoint, gradually rebuilding trust and understanding between us. My professional life continued flourishing at Crescent. 9 months after starting, I was formally promoted to marketing manager, with a substantial raise and my own small team to lead. The promotion came with new challenges, but also confirmed what I'd begun to believe about myself, that I was capable, valuable, and worthy of success. My relationship with Alicia deepened from friendship to romance, adding another dimension of joy to my new life. Her creativity and warmth complemented my analytical nature, and her close-knit Mexican-American family welcomed me with an openness that helped heal some of the family-shaped wounds in my heart. On the 1-year anniversary of my departure from Chicago, I took a personal day to reflect on everything that had changed. Sitting on my apartment balcony with a cup of coffee, I marveled at how differently things had turned out than I'd imagined during those dark days in my childhood bedroom. The ultimatum that had felt so cruel, starting next month you'll pay rent if you want to stay here, had actually been the catalyst for necessary growth and change. Being called dead weight had motivated me to prove my worth not just to others but to myself. What had seemed like ending had been a beginning in disguise. Dad visited Dallas 4 times that year, each visit more comfortable than the last. During his most recent stay, he'd mentioned potentially transferring to his company's Texas office, a possibility that would have terrified me a year ago, but now seemed like an opportunity for continued healing. You seem happy, he observed during that visit. Settled. I am, I confirmed. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The wisdom I gained through this journey wasn't what I expected. I learned that sometimes the people who should support you the most can hurt you the deepest, but that doesn't define your worth or potential. I discovered that starting over isn't failure. It's often the bravest choice you can make. Most importantly, I realized that while you can't control how others treat you, you can always control how you respond and the path you choose afterward. There's a certain freedom in being underestimated, in being pushed away by those who should embrace you. It forces you to find strength you didn't know you possessed, and to build connections based on genuine appreciation rather than obligation. Sometimes, the family you create through friendship and mutual respect is more nurturing than the one you were born into. Dad and I will never recapture the easy closeness we had before Margaret entered our lives. Too much has happened, too many words can't be unspoken. But we're building something new, a relationship between two adults who are learning to see and respect each other for who they truly are, not who they wish the other would be. What started with a demand for rent ended with me finding my true home not in a place, but in the confidence to create my own path. Sometimes, being forced out is exactly the push you need to find where you truly belong. Have you ever had to leave a situation that was holding you back? Did it lead to unexpected growth? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and like this video. Your support means everything as we build this community of people who've turned setbacks into comebacks. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply living well.